Welcome to the Bible in a Year podcast, a resource from Enter the Bible. Journey with us through the books of the Bible, discovering more about Scripture and how it shapes our lives today. I'm Kathryn Schifferdecker.
And I'm Jennie Wojciechowski.
And today we're joined by our special guest, Professor Monica Melanchthon. Monica is a professor of Hebrew Bible Old Testament at Pilgrim Theological College, which is within the University of Divinity, and it's located in Melbourne, Australia. So you're quite a distance away from us. So thank you so much for coming to join us on this podcast, Monica.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I'm quite excited, really.
Yeah, we're asking you to talk about the book of Joshua, and you have some expertise in this area. You recently edited and contributed to a volume called Terror in the Bible, Rhetoric, Gender, and Violence. Mm-hmm. And I guess if we're to think about books in the Bible that are, violent, Joshua would be one of them, right?
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, that book was not addressed in that book. There was no major article on the book, let me say that. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, can you give us a quick summary or outline of the book?
Yeah, well, it's not a book that people normally would want to read, but anyway, the book is a significant story that outlines how Israel entered Canaan, the promised land, after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And the Israelites were led by Joshua, who succeeded Moses. So the entry into the land and what they did initially before the land was allotted or distributed to the 12 tribes. And this involved, of course, the conquering of the Canaanites, who were the native inhabitants of the land. So the book as a whole contains events leading up to the conquest, the collective war effort of the Israelites, their military victory over all the Canaanite states, the total destruction of the land and its inhabitants. All of this, of course, following instructions as given to them by God, recorded for us in Deuteronomy chapter 7. And then the second half of the book narrates for us the division and the allotment of the land among the tribes. And the book ends with a covenant renewal ceremony.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is probably one of the more famous passages in the book. Right?
Yeah, in Joshua chapter 24, where Joshua and the Israelites, declare that, Yahweh is their God and we will serve Yahweh. Yeah.
Yeah. How would you sum up the message of this book in a few sentences, Monica?
The book, in a way, is claiming that this land that we are now entering is a land that has been given to us as a gift by God to God's chosen people, namely the Israelites. And the book is about how they come to possess the land. And basically, it is affirming or stating that it was not just our effort, but it was an effort that was supplemented or accompanied by God's involvement in the acquisition of the land.
So what kind of book is it? Because it has the feel of a history, but it seems like there's more going on. What genre would this fit into?
Well, I would say that the primary genre of the book is that it is a historical narrative or a narrative history. Sometimes it's also just called a conquest account, that records Israel's conquest of Canaan. And within this historical narrative, you also have elements of law, the covenant renewal. And it, in some ways, it serves as an example of how, with God's intervention and accompaniment, the people of Israel were successful in taking over this land. So in a way, it's a fulfillment of the promises that God has made, or God did make, to Abraham in the book of Genesis. It is a historical narrative, but it is more also a theological interpretation of that history. Am I making sense?
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yeah, so not just kind of stating the history of the conquest, but assigning meaning to it.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? Yeah. Theological meaning, like what is God up to in this history?
So it's the relationship between God and the Israelites, what the Israelites had to do for God, what God did for the Israelites in ensuring that this project or this venture into this new land is successful. But was it really successful? That's another question.
Yeah. Yeah. What would, I realize this is just a follow-up question to that statement. What would you say about the historicity of this narrative?
It is a controversial book, even within the academy, considering the fact that there are some suspicions regarding how true this entire narrative as we have in Joshua is. I guess the problem is that the book of Joshua gives us a picture of a whole-scale entry of the Israelites into the land, and basically that the Israelites went in as a big group and destroyed the land, and were successful in annihilating the entire population. But when you compare the details in Joshua with the first chapter of the book of Judges, you will find that there are differences, because the first chapter of Judges narrates for us the fact that there were still parts of the land that were not conquered. There were still native people, surviving or living alongside the Israelites who had just come. So this has led to, some speculation and the development of theories to explain how the conquest maybe conquest is not the right word, how the land was actually acquired. Was it as Joshua depicts it?
Thank you, Monica. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but you explained it well. Yeah, there is a lot of controversy about that. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, we come to a portion of each episode that we call Bible Bingo. Not that we have bingo cards here, but the point being that if you were to play a bingo game with this particular book of the Bible, with Joshua, what are 5 concepts or words or people or places that would be on your bingo card, like things that you would encounter in the book of Joshua that are either unique to the book of Joshua or just so important that you wouldn't want to skip over them. So the first one that you mentioned, Monica, was Joshua, which seems clear.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the book is named after him, and he's a significant leader who led the Israelites on this journey, and yet he's a character who we don't hear much about in the latter books of the Old Testament here, which is surprising given the very significant role that he played. But Joshua, I think, as an individual, gives us some insight into what leadership is about. And so if you read particularly chapter 1 of the book of Joshua, we learn that Joshua's strength and confidence came primarily from his knowledge that God is all-powerful, that God is steering him into this position. He has had first-hand experience of God in action, saw God's overt power in and through the very many miraculous deeds performed while they were journeying towards Canaan. He also knew that God keeps God's promises. So in this first chapter, you learn a lot about Joshua's faith, Joshua's reliance on God, and his belief and trust that the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And I think that is what actually supported him, encouraged him, and strengthened him in his leadership. So, Joshua, well, there'd be no book of Joshua, I guess, anyway.
That's right. He is a pretty central figure, yes. Yeah. That makes sense to have that on the bingo card. Thank you. Thank you, Monica. The next person or name you mentioned is Rahab, which I don't think we've mentioned yet on this episode. Who is Rahab?
Okay. Rahab, as you know, appears in the second chapter of the book of Joshua, and she's presented to us as a sex worker living on the edges of the city. And when the Israelite spies go to check out the land, so to speak, they approach her and she offers them hospitality and then eventually helps them escape the Canaanite overlords, who were after them. But before she lets them leave, she makes a deal with them that, when they do conquer the land, that she and her family would be spared from death. And so as a non-Israelite, she's presented to us as someone who articulates her understanding of the God of Israel in an almost prophetic-like manner, Her speech is impressive, it's authoritative and very clear. And so she, in a sense, is an agent of God who speaks with authority, acts with courage, and is also willing to take risks.
That's a beautiful description. And she shows up in the genealogy of Jesus.
Yes.
In Matthew chapter 1, which is pretty amazing. So a significant woman.
Yeah, it's a significant woman. And I think most of us don't want to give her due attention partly because she was not an Israelite or because of her profession as a sex worker. And so I think I might say it now, and that is maybe part of her offering to help Israel came from, yes, the desire to live and to have her family spared from death because she knew they would all be killed. But at the same time, I think as someone who lives on the edges of society by virtue of profession, we need to ask what drove her into that position. It's very few people who will enter into sex work voluntarily. So as a marginalized individual living on the edges of society, she was perhaps critical of the structures of the community or the structures of the society which put her in that position in the first place. And she probably saw no hope in redemption or a change that will come about within the Canaanite social structure, at least one that would be helpful for her. And so she was much more open to being receptive to the Israelite invasion because she had an understanding of the Israelite God, who was God of justice and fairness and so on. That's one possible
No, that's
reading.
fascinating. I love that.
Yeah.
I've never heard that interpretation of Rahab, but that really makes a lot of sense. That really
It
does.
does.
So,
really
so
interesting.
so as a marginalized individual, she was perhaps a part of the resistant movement, and was being persecuted by the Canaanites. And so I don't think this is hard to imagine.
No, it's not. It seems obvious, but I just never have thought of it that way. Thank you so much, Monica. That's really helpful. All right. So Joshua, Rahab, the next bingo term you said was land.
Yeah, the land is central, right, to the book. This land that the Israelites wanted to possess, which they considered to be gifted to them by way of the promises that God made to Abraham. And land is a controversial issue in many parts of the world, and as it is right now also, and it has been controversial in Israel, and Israel has never been able to completely possess the land, because we know from the few verses available to us that the natives were not completely annihilated. So what is the significance of land, and how does land how is it connected with faith, and what is the role of land in the relationship between Israel and God? So yes, I think land is very, very significant and controversial. And in this short time, one can't say much more than that.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah. Significant, in the book of Joshua, and as you say, to forever, I think, including today. Yeah.
Yes. And land has been at the center of conflict and violence between peoples in many parts of the world, not just in Israel. And so the book, in a way, is providing the rationale for the takeover of the land of Canaan, which has been the home of several groups of people. But this land is something that they believed was given to them as a gift. And secondly, is that this land is a possession, that they can take possession of the land because the Lord has given it to them to possess. And a third idea is that this land is also their inheritance. This is the land that God is giving to them as a gift, as a possession, as an inheritance. Yeah. And so all the legal and political connotations, assures every family, tribe, a portion of the land, which is to be divided by a lot. So, I think land is important because it's a gift, it is a possession, it's an inheritance.
Thank you. All right, that leads to the next word on the bingo card, conquest. What would you say about conquest?
Conquest. Well, the thing is, for people who would do perhaps a more literal reading of the book of Joshua, this is about the conquest, taking over of the land and declaring that it is ours because it has been given to us by God. So conquest is a significant word that is not necessarily used within the biblical text, but it's a word that has been ascribed to the book. What is the book about? It's about the conquest of the land of Canaan, right? In that way, the word conquest is significant, and it is significant for a lot of people in the world today who have been victims of colonization and their land taken over by invading peoples. Yes.
Yeah. And then the last term on the bingo card that you wanted to talk about is a difficult one. Not that conquest isn't, of course, but this one even more so, perhaps. Genocide. What do you want to say about that?
Yeah, again, when you look at the instructions given by God in Deuteronomy chapter 7, which Joshua is now implementing in a way or responding to, it is about the annihilation of the people of Canaan. And so you find that what is really being carried out is a destruction of people, their livestock, their women, the children, their homes, their temples, their shrines, etc. So it's a complete destruction of the infrastructure of both animate and inanimate objects. But at the same time, it is an annihilation of a people's culture, a people's language, a people's memory. Yeah, so in a way, it is a destruction of humanity, or not recognizing the humanity of the people, or not recognizing the image of God in these people.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think when people embark on such large-scale violent conquests, there is a sense in which the conqueror also loses a little of his or her humanity.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is not humane behavior. I mean, as I say this, I keep thinking of what's happening in Gaza today, and I don't think any sensitive human being can actually withstand the destruction that we see that is happening there. And
yeah, it's heartbreaking.
And just wonder how those who are carrying this out can actually look at that and feel good about themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the. That's why I use the word genocide.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for playing Bible Bingo, Monica. It's a difficult book in so many ways, the Book of Joshua.
Yeah.
For the reasons that you've just articulated. I mean, it has this charismatic leader, right, who's strong and courageous, as you said, and it's about the fulfillment of God's promises of land. And yet, what about the Canaanites, right? And what about the other peoples that are conquered in this story?
But yet also within, I don't know if this is the right time, but also within this book, there are redeeming features. The book is a difficult read, partly because of the emotions that it might generate. But the book has been used to justify violent invasions in part of the mission history of the church will testify to this. It's a similar ideology like Joshua that has undergirded movements to conquer far and distant lands using ideologies of terra nullius or, similar ideology. Are you familiar with terra nullius?
I'm not. What is
I'm
that?
not.
Okay. So basically, terra nullius is that this land, there are no people who live here. They don't recognize the people who live. So
Okay.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Since I'm living in Australia, it's a term that is often used here to explain how when the white settler came to Australia, it's basically saying that the Aboriginals who lived here were not human beings, So in a way, it states that the land is empty of human habitation, so we can take this land.
Right. Yeah.
So various similar ideologies are used in order to justify people's taking over of the land, and faith or religion has played a key role, in justifying those efforts. In Joshua, this is land that has been given to us by God, and so we do what God has instructed us to do. But I think that's the overall image that one derives from reading the book of Joshua. But I think if you read it more carefully, in fact, I believe that the book is actually wrestling with this notion. How do we go into a land that, yes, we believe God has gifted to us, but how do we carry out this vast destruction as we have been instructed? So you find that the book is wrestling with this question, and I think what is significant for me is whoever this author was who wrote this book was sensitive enough to inform us of the fact that there were people living there, and these were the names of these various communities. You find stories like the Gibeonites and Rahab and Achan, so there are strands of resistance against this colonization
colonization.
Yeah. And I think that says that there is a wrestling of some sort that is going on within the book. There's a conversation, between those who are saying, yes, let's go get it, and there are others who are resisting. And the resistance is coming not just from the non-Israelites, like perhaps, the Gibeonites, but the resistance is also coming from people within the community who are sometimes not following all the instructions given.
So our next question is significant passages. And can you say more about the Gibeonites or the Akan?
For me, the Gibeonite story is an important one, which is found in Joshua chapter 9 and 10. But in that particular chapter, the Gibeonites present themselves to Joshua and the Israelites as a community that have come from far away, wearing old clothes, sort of dusty clothes and dusty shoes and stale bread. And they say that we have come to you because we know that you're going to attack us, we don't want to be attacked, and so we've come to make a peace treaty with you so that our cities will not be destroyed. And later, Joshua enters into a treaty with them, but when he discovers that they actually didn't come from far, but from, they lived close by. The Israelites discover the trick, but the treaty is still honored. And Joshua then consigns the Gibeonites to be the hewers of wood and the drawers of water for the sanctuary. So they are now given a place within the Israelite structure. So you find here that trickery is used, but then you also have to acknowledge the fact that Joshua honors the treaty that has been made and therefore spares them. Yeah, in Joshua chapter 7, you hear about the fact that Akan is an individual who has taken a little bit of the booty that he was not supposed to take. This is part of the rules of harem. He takes a beautiful mantle from Shinar and 200 shekels of silver and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels from Jericho. All of this which should have been devoted to destruction, meaning offered to God. It is tantamount to transgression of the covenant. And so when God reveals that Akan from the tribe of Judah is the culprit and he has done this, his entire household, women, children, slaves, livestock, are all stoned and burned and killed as punishment. And a heap of stones was raised on the site, which apparently to this day is named the Valley of Achor, meaning calamity. So I think in a way, the story also says something about human capacity to disobey, human capacity to be attracted to things that don't belong to you or you should not take.
Yeah.
But anyway, he is punished quite violently, and his whole household has to bear the brunt of his sin.
His greed,
Wow, his crime. Wow.
And I think in a way the story echoes also something that happened in the life of Saul, where Saul falls into disfavor with God because Saul spares the life of an individual he was supposed to have killed.
The king of the Amalekites. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
So you would want to wonder, when does is saving lives therefore wrong, even if it is the life of an enemy? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those are hard questions.
Yeah.
So Monica, what is one key theme that you would like people to look for when they enter into this text?
Actually, I think the book has several wonderful themes. Joshua chapter 7, verses 1 to 6 and verses 10 to 26 is about doing justice, is an identity marker of Israel and of special importance. It was theologically intended for people to attend to the needs of those who are poor and weak. It was a covenantal obligation. The riches and the social assets of the land are understood as common resources that are to be managed and deployed for the enhancement of the community. So when someone like Akan steals, and he's stealing it for selfish reasons, in other words, for his own gain, and when he's withholding it for private purposes, in a way he's then damaging, he's causing damage to the community. So in a way, the public good requires that active social power must be mobilized in order to augment the entire community and to resist personal enhancement. So this is about the individual and the community. I think that particular text would be an important one. I think also in the context of climate change, I would say Joshua chapter 10, verses 1 to 14 is an important one because it talks about honoring creation and recognizing God's presence in creation. So in Joshua chapter 10, in keeping with the covenant between Israel and Gibeon, Israel comes to the rescue of Gibeon when 5 kings attack Gibeon for becoming an ally of Israel. And here Yahweh is an active participant because Yahweh rains huge hailstones and kills many, and many more are killed by the sword. You can't escape the violence. There is no question about it. And so, and in this particular instance, we are heard, actually, the sun stands still and the moon stops from rising until the nation was avenged, in response to a plea by Joshua. So one is the response of creation or nature to Joshua's request, and the second is Joshua's faith, a faith that can stop the earth from moving until the battle was won. So in a way, creation here participates in the salvific work of God, and creation also awaits its liberation from pollution and decay. So God becomes present through creation. So in a way, a story emphasizes the role played by nature in the securing of and the settlement in the land of promise. It's just a short narrative, but it is significant, the importance that is given to that moment where the sun stops or stands still.
That is an amazing story.
Quite the detail.
Yeah. I think a third theme for me is found in Joshua chapter 18, verses 1 to 20, which talks about borders and boundaries. And I think, again, this is a very significant issue for us today, particularly as it is playing out in the United States. Boundaries and borders, yes, provide security. They provide identity and belonging. But borders and boundaries also have the potential to create conflict, because of the emotion that is evoked by such membership. But in Joshua, of course, the tribal boundaries had to be established in order to avoid future boundary disputes. And so this had to be done soon, at the very onset. Being allotted a portion of Yahweh's land and being able to live on it was proof of one's membership among God's people or within the tribal confederation. So again, this is related to what I said about the land. The land, therefore, was the focus of one's practical response to the grace and goodness of God. And I think just this morning I was reading a short article that appeared in Sojourners, written by a Filipino, who talks about the fact that boundaries and borders, yes, have become matters of conflict, but he also talks about the fact that there are borders and boundaries within our hearts that restrict us from being open to someone new or being open to someone who looks different or being receptive to new ideas or perspectives. And he goes on to talk about the fact that God's grace is actually borderless. Yeah. It spreads. And so what does God's grace mean? What does the goodness of God mean theologically and ethically, where we are trying to reinforce and strengthen borders which are creating divisions and conflict? And I don't think the Israelites in the book of Joshua were actually successful in securing these borders from the non-Israelites, because many of them were not annihilated. They continued to coexist alongside the Israelites. So boundaries and borders, I think, is an important theme. What is the significance of that?
Those are all fascinating themes, Monica. Thank you. There's some depth to this book that may not be immediately apparent, I think, if one just reads it as a conquest narrative.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is why I'm saying that there's a wrestling going on within the book. I can't think another word. Where we are called into that conversation. We are being invited into that conversation. And I don't think Joshua is stating that conquest is the answer or violence is the answer, because there are little seeds of resistance to those ideas within the book itself. And for me, as one who comes from a historically marginalized community in India, I'm looking for those strands or strains of resistance within the book. And so that is why individuals like Achan or the Gibeonites or Rahab speak to me. And that is what I find appealing about the book. And so I think definitely we should not rule out Joshua. There are many redeeming qualities about the book. And I think, there is one other passage that really struck me hard when I was reading it, and that was in Joshua chapter 20. So the tribes have been given the land. Much of the Canaanite territory has been conquered and occupied. But then 6 cities were appointed as the cities of refuge for those who may have killed accidentally. So these cities of refuge become a safe haven for people trying to escape punishment until a public trial decides on the issue. So therefore, this was a divine mandate that recognized that offenders deserve to be punished, but those who killed accidentally deserve mercy and a fair trial.
There's so much there, Monica. Thank you for that. Our last question that we always ask, and it's a bit of a challenge, is how would you describe this book in 7 words or less?
I think I said that it's an extremely relevant book for us today.
Yeah.
Partly because of this theological wrestling. And it's calling for, in a way, it is calling for engagement so that we enter into the debate that is happening within the book and try to ascertain for us the moral, the theological, the ethical imperatives for us as Christians in a world that is now characterized by extreme violence, most of the time unjustified. So I think rereading this book in today's context is extremely important. Of course, those of us who come from colonized countries have been reading this book. Part of liberation theology, has been articulated on our readings of Exodus, but also the book of Joshua. So what might we learn if we look at this book from the perspective of the Canaanites or the Perizzites or the Hittites who were affected by the entry of the Israelites? And if I may say a last word, in Joshua chapter 5, where they have just entered the land after crossing the river Jordan, and the first thing that Joshua does is asks people, all the men in the community, to be circumcised or recircumcised after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. So circumcision is the first sort of religious or significant ritual that is performed. And the thing is, the circumcision was necessary, first of all, to determine who is within the community, because circumcision was a mark of the covenant. So they are circumcised, after which they participate in the Passover, in the celebration of the Passover. So circumcision was essential or required to participate in the Passover. So circumcision first, Passover second. 2 religious rituals that are performed as soon as they entered the land. And therefore the land then is baptized in the blood of the circumcised. So there's a takeover of the land. And so in my reading of Joshua chapter 5, I see these 2 rituals as ceremonials of arrival. So if you read through the history books, when the British came to India or the British went to parts of Africa or whatever, when people go to the moon, you put a flag.
Plant the flag. Yeah.
So there are rituals that are performed. Some we know, some we don't know. So my question is, are these rituals of arrival, ceremonies of arrival, which in a way symbolizes that this land is now ours? And again, from an ecological perspective, was the land receptive to this? Maybe the land was aware of the fact. From an ecological perspective, if the land is a character, the land is welcoming of them as a people who require a home, having left behind slavery and oppression. But the land did not know that it would be possessed in the way it was possessed.
I really appreciate you're complexifying this story for us, Monica.
Yeah. So it's very interesting.
Both really difficult things and some redeeming qualities. And I appreciate you lifting up both of those things. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode on the Book of Joshua.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been the Bible in a Year podcast from Enter the Bible. Check out more great resources on the Bible at enterthebible.org. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast app or watching on YouTube, we appreciate you being with us. You can get more great resources like this, conversations, reflections, commentaries, courses, anything that you could need as you dive in and enter the Bible with curiosity and faith. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and review or like and subscribe. And of course, the very best compliment you can pay us is to share this podcast with a friend. Until next time.